So picture this, you get a brand new GoPro Hero 9 to get some really good video footage of an action sport or hiking or whatever. You get home after a really good day, after you've gotten some really cool shots, and you check your footage. A lot of the footage is shaky and unusable, like literally unusable. And you're thinking to yourself, why? It should work right out of the box, shouldn't it? Well, here are 8 ways that can help you fix that. So the number one reason why your GoPro Hero 9 has shaky and unusable footage is because of Hypersmooth. It's set too high. Probably have it set to boost, and you're thinking that if I have it set to boost, my footage will be super smooth and not shaky at all. Well, in reality, you kind of want to turn that down from boost to either high or on, or even just off in some cases. So I kind of look at it this way. If you have a really bright sunny day, then you can turn Hypersmooth all the way up. And in most cases, it'll work. But if it's partially sunny or cloudy, or you're kind of in a wooded area, then you want to use Hypersmooth sparingly. This reduces the crop factor on your GoPro and will probably yield better results that aren't as shaky. Another thing to note is that the GoPro is an action camera. It's a small camera. It's meant to be small and compact and portable. But that also means that the sensor is really, really small, and its ability to intake or capture light is also smaller than your traditional DSLR or mirrorless cameras. So with that in mind, it's important to remember to take the GoPro out on a really good sunny day. Try to get the best lighting situation as possible. It will struggle indoors or in a low light situation, unfortunately. Another thing that I had to learn using the GoPro was that I was setting the ISO way too low. I'm always trying to keep the ISO as low as possible, and I had kind of had that same mindset using the GoPro, but that's not the case. You definitely want to up the ISO as much as possible to reduce the motion blur, the jittery shakes, just the general artifacts that happens when your ISO is too low. I would recommend starting at the max ISO and then kind of going down until you find that happy medium of smooth footage, and hopefully it's not too noisy. Another tip that I would suggest is to reduce your frames per second. Having lower frames per second, like let's say going from 60 to 24, will definitely help bring more light into the camera, which might help you on a cloudy day. You probably won't be able to shoot 60 on a cloudy day, but you could definitely probably shoot 24 and have less noisy footage. So it's really kind of a personal preference, but it's something to keep in mind. Your frame rate definitely affects how much light gets into your GoPro, and you might want to choose accordingly depending on your lighting situation. Another tip that you want to keep in mind is that if you're a linear view user like me, then unfortunately you're not using the entire sensor of the GoPro. I don't really like the ultra-wide fisheye look, but it does use the entire sensor of the camera. The narrower the view that you kind of crop into, the less of the sensor that the camera uses, which means that you also get less light for your shots. Some things that I've noticed in the last 8 months of use is that the GoPro definitely sharpens and saturates. The GoPro definitely sharpens and saturates in the camera, and you definitely want to use a flat color profile and turn the sharpness down to low. You can always add in that clarity or fine tune that in post. And the reason for doing this is that when you add clarity or sharpness, it also brings out the artifacts, jitters, and the shakes and the motion blurs in the camera. So you kind of want to reduce the amount of contrast that the camera is capturing. So it should kind of give you a smoother image and picture quality. And lastly, I'd also turn down your EV compensation down to -1. Like my last point, turning down the EV compensation to -1 will also reduce the amount of contrast that your GoPro captures, and hopefully get you better footage. These are the tips that I've kind of learned from personal experience or from scouring the internet. The number one thing to really remember is to use your GoPro in the proper light situation and to up the ISO and to turn the Hypersmooth down a little bit, and I think you should be pretty much fine. And I hope these tips have helped you out. They've definitely helped me get better video footage from my GoPro Hero 9, and I really hope it does the same for you. And I'll see you next time.